Hi, this is Janice Perkins with Capacity, and I'm joined today by Kyle Lammont of Exodus Church here in Wichita, Kansas. Kyle and I have known each other as people even before I was ever a church attendee, probably 4 or 5 years, maybe,
Yeah,
maybe
about that.
longer.
Yeah,
Professionally, personally, you and your wife Mandy and a lot of the staff there, and you like to shoot hoops with my boy,
that's
so
right.
that's a good
Yeah.
time.
Oh,
I thought heading into this Easter weekend and Holy Week, you would be a great person to have this conversation with about being on the bright side, because that's what faith is all about, is
yeah.
looking forward to something greater and better and something outside of ourselves. And I think a lot of people need to hear that message right now. But I want you to first start and just tell me the overarching atmosphere. What's the weather in church when none of us get to be there in a building? So how are you as a nonprofit navigating this on the bright side?
Yeah. So it's a crazy season for churches right now. It really is. Most churches have to essentially retool everything that they do. There's really not a single aspect of ministry that is left unaffected because ministry is at the heart. It's people business. You know,
Mhm.
you're dealing with people, and when you can't gather together and when social distancing is required and a necessity during a time like this, being able to minister to people and connect with people becomes difficult, and which means we have to get creative with it. So certainly on the bright side, man, we live in a day and age where technology allows us to connect in the same way you and I are doing right now. So that's been great. We've been able to utilize Zoom and Skype and all sorts of video mediums to connect with people. As a church, we have started a podcast to be able to connect and continue to try to encourage our people, remind them who's in control during this time,
Mhm.
remind them of the hope that we have in Christ. So we've been able to do that through a podcast. We've been able to keep our blog up to date and send out devotionals and then video messages and so on. A lot of churches are taking their entire uh, Sunday morning service online, so people can tune in and essentially just watch the pastor, the band walk through a morning worship service. We're not doing that part, but we're certainly engaging our people in the ways that God has provided for us.
Well, it also looks like in the meantime, with all your social distancing time management, you've trimmed your beard.
Ah, yes, that's right. That's right. Man, it was just we had a couple warm days there, and yeah, I had shaver's regret though. Shaver's remorse.
Shaver's remorse.
For
That's funny. So, tell me globally also within the nonprofit community, because I'm sure you've had lots of conversations with other churches and nonprofits. What's the thing that's surprising everyone the most about support within your congregations going on right now?
Yeah, I was talking to somebody who works with a lot of churches in Kansas and Nebraska, and he was saying that overall giving is down about 40%. Um, God's been good to us. I mean, there's been a dip in giving, and as a nonprofit, we serve people and we live and we're able to continue to do that based off of people's generosity and giving to the
Mhm.
church. So certainly, a time like this where people are afraid of work scenarios or going off furlough or even getting laid off or fired um, tends to tighten the wallet a little bit, and
Mhm.
people might struggle to give. Our people at our church have been very faithful. They've been a huge blessing to us and been able to continue to give for the most part. So that's certainly been an encouragement for us on as Exodus Church. But as I've talked to other churches, there's certainly a crunch there, and a lot of prayer and a lot of asking and reminding folks to continue to give. And I think really any nonprofit that operates based off of people's donations um, really kind of feel that same sort of crunch right now.
No, I would say so. And I had a couple other conversations with nonprofits too. And I do think there are people who are being more creative. And I just want to encourage people to utilize your resources, even if it's not money. So
Right.
if you have been laid off or furloughed, you have other resources available to you. And whether or not that's going to do yard work at the church and keep out social distancing from all the other people doing yard work or whatever it is. There's still abilities that we have that we can give until we can give monetarily again. But I have been encouraged by many churches where the giving hasn't decreased at all. And I think that is a testimony to people's ability to just try not to make a difference, right? Try not to let it affect them yet. I think that's a hope that we all have, that it passes, right? Despite any gap that we have in income. So I'm really encouraged by the hope stories and the good stories and the continuum that's happening in a lot of faith-based organizations.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. For Easter this year, we're doing something at our church called the Stations of the Street. And it's kind of a modified version of the Stations of the Cross, which have been around for a long time. So we're going to have a drive-through version of the Stations of the Street.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So there'll be 12 different pieces of art that we have set up around our parking lot. And there'll be an audio kind of reflection devotional thing that you can listen to as you go through. But all that to say, we've had multiple families in our church with more free time because of everything that's going on. They've donated a lot of time and their efforts and resources to build the signs and do a lot of the work to be able to pull this off. So certainly we've got people in our church, and I've heard many other stories as you have about churches and people being able to just really give time at this point and their
That's right.
talent and skills.
It's a commodity that a lot of us never used to have an abundance of.
Right.
But it's one of the most important commodities that we're given this side of heaven. And so being able to resource it and steward it in a different way is a blessing for all of us that we just didn't have before. So, and that it's also a way you can work with your kids when you're looking for more space and time to do things with them at home outside of the traditional school work that's not taking up the day anymore. That would also be a great idea. So let me pivot to individual space. In the question I've been asking is, what's one thing that you can do for yourself in this time period? And I want you to answer that from a faith perspective on what a lot of people are wrestling with right now, which is anxiety. And I'm a hope monster, so just speak away. Let's pull the platform out.
Yeah. I certainly think that fear is something that is always looming for us in our culture today. It's something that we spend a lot of money and we put a lot of time in to try to avoid fear. And if we can avoid it, then we feel like we're in some sort of control over our lives. And the reason we want to avoid fear, for good reason, fear is something that deceives us. It confuses us. It leads us down paths that would end in despair. And we know this. So what we see happening is people beginning to lose the perception of control. And then when that happens, fear comes rushing in, right? Because I no longer have control the way that I thought I once had. And I think this is one of the best things that can happen to people, because the illusion of control is also an illusion of safety, right? As if I had control, I could keep fear away. I could keep myself in a financial or relational or spiritual safe place, and being able to live as one without worry and so on. But what this has done is it has kind of pulled back the curtains of that illusion, and it really just says, man, you don't have control
of anything.
And you have just as much control today as you did 5 weeks ago.
You don't even have control over toilet paper. I mean, you got nothing.
So true. But when we lose control, we begin to live out of fear. And I think this is one of the great things that can happen to us individually, and to our society, to realize, man, we are not people that have been given the ability to control our lives the way we think we have. So then the question comes back, well, if I'm not in control, who is in control? And that's where the great hope comes, right? Because we see all throughout the scriptures that God is the one that is in control of all things. And the fears that are there in this world and things that we might be concerned about, when we realize that we are far safer in God's hands and in God's control than we are if we had control. That's a very freeing and liberating thing. And then we can see hope. We can understand what hope is at that point. But I don't think we can really experience the hope that we have until we realize we really don't have control.
Well, I think what it's really exposes, even as a believer, every time there's a situational trauma, and like you said, this was some pretty bright exposure. This is like in the desert, really hot, sunburned exposure. And for even a longtime believer like myself, it exposes threads that were attached to things that were not as secure.
Yeah.
That I didn't, like the invisible spider webs that you can only see in a certain light. There's still threads of things that the world tries to attach to us in security that all of a sudden we were white knuckling over a period of time that we don't realize it. And so it kind of exposes all the things that we were tied to. Now that I have time to see the spider webs, it's like, wow, like all those things need to be cut. It's a great opportunity to just cut all those things and take
Mhm.
stock of what was driving a lot of my motives, really.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And when you do that, when you see those spider webs, when you see those threads, and you're able to identify them for what they are, and cut them and get rid of them, you're in a place that for some it might seem very vulnerable, right?
Mhm.
Because it's not an easy thing to trust in God when we love to trust ourselves. Um, but the amount of energy and effort that goes into trying to maintain control or to have enough going on in our life to be able to kind of trust ourselves,
Mhm.
is exhausting. And
Yes.
we live in a society of people who are exhausted from constantly running after this illusion of control and safety. So I think at this time as well, when you see those things, we can let them go, trust that God is in control, and at that moment, uh, we're called to rest in that. We can
Mhm.
really rest. We can experience the peace that God has. Jesus talks about how He leaves us peace, and He is our peace. Says, "In this world you will have tribulation." Right? You'll have struggle, pain, suffering, fear. You'll have tribulation. Yet take heart, for I've overcome the world. Right? So for us as believers in Jesus to be able to trust that He is in control, He has overcome all of this,
Mhm.
and if I believe that, I can rest and not run after this illusion of control that I've been running after for so long.
Okay, you're gonna love this because you're a word nerd like me and love to read. As I've been researching and talking more about hope, I had been researching hope in different languages, and one of them that I haven't spoken about yet, but it fits into this conversation so well, is in Russian. The word hope, of course, I can't pronounce it, but it actually means to lean into something. It means recumbence, which then I
Huh.
had to look up recumbence, but it means to lean into. So it's kind of like an easy chair or a hammock, or you're not just relaxing, like taking a deep breath. You're actually leaning back into something that is holding you up more than your own self. So it's a posture thing that takes yourself out of it. Your musculature is out of the picture, and you're supposed to be resting in it. So it's really, that was such a beautiful picture for me. That's bigger than peace. That's bigger than trust. It's a combination of both of those, and from both of those creates and enables me to house more hope.
Yeah.
Because I can rely on something bigger than myself.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, that's great. You'll have to send me that word so I can look
I
into
will. I will. It's like word nerding, word nerding.
it.
So tell me from a faith perspective, when it comes to relationships in a time like this,
Yeah.
where we are disconnected, we are built to be in relationship by
Yeah.
our Creator, and here we are at distant, and then the people that we are closest to, we're on top of. So
Right.
it's like this. It's the two bookends that can drive bad behavior both directions, right? So how can I maintain a better semblance of me within a walk of faith in this?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. I know that's something, especially for a lot of the extroverts out there. This is horrible,
Yeah.
right? Being confined to your home. Exactly. Some of the introverts are loving it. Like, oh, finally, my day has arrived. Um, But I think you're absolutely right. We are designed to be in relationship with one another,
Mhm.
and to be alone is not good. It actually we begin to operate on a level that's less than human, right? Because as human beings, we are designed again to be in relationship and community with one another. So I would want to encourage people who are at home, for one, to again, the fear aspect will drive you toward despair and isolation. So as we navigate this world that we are living in right now, we must do so with wisdom, but also without fear. So we have social distancing and the need for that, but that's not the same thing as hiding out in my basement for 4 weeks and not going outside or anything. Fear would have us do that. Fear would have us isolate ourselves. So certainly want to use wisdom. We want to love our neighbors well, as it relates to trying to get through this COVID-19 pandemic that we're in. Uh, but certainly don't isolate yourself from people. Um, Whether it's phone calls or video calls, or even going to the park with people and connecting with people, you can do that, and you can relate with one another face to face, even though you might be 6 feet apart as opposed to just 3 feet apart like normal. So again, I think holding on to uh, the wisdom and fighting against fear and saying no, continue to live your life, continue to relate to people, because if you don't, the consequences of that are not good. That again, we go down that path of despair and fear and isolation.
No, I would agree. And this is, I'm going to ask you a really heavy question that you might be like, I'm not sure we have enough hours in the day to answer that. But I'm sure it's a looming question for a lot of people, especially those who weren't regular church attenders before and either have a semblance of faith or who are asking and searching for it right now, is that in a time like this with something so global and dark and scary, is who and where is God in something like this?
Right.
How,
Yeah.
how do you answer that for them in the simplest terms possible? I'm putting you on a timer. I'm just kidding.
Right. My goodness. Yeah. Well, there's a few things come to mind right away. Um, the first one, even looking at that word hope that you had mentioned earlier, as far as leaning into something, um, as Christians, our hope is not this Gnostic hope, right? This idea of hope in the future that's disembodied, that's not real, that's not tangible. Hope is weighty, right? There's a reality to it. So when we think about what is our hope in this time, um, where can we go other than God and have any sort of confidence that we can lean into it?
Mhm.
Again, because so much in our world is falling apart right now.
That's right.
So the question is not, is God far away from this? That's certainly not the case. And the cross of Christ shows us and demonstrates with such a beautiful and haunting clarity that God is in the midst of suffering. Right? He comes and he meets his people in suffering. He is not waiting for us on the other side.
Hmm.
And that is our hope, is that he is present, and we must then place our hope in him and lean into him, in order to be able to walk through this well. So I said that's one piece. Another aspect to it, I would say, um, is when we think about what decisions and what changes our lives have to make, or we have to make in our lives at this time, such as not going to work, or not being able to go to the stores or the restaurants that I normally go to. That's a great opportunity to really kind of pause and think about life as a whole and kind of catalog our lives and the decisions that we make overall. And what we see, if we go to the scripture, what we see is God is sovereign over and Lord of the plagues and the trials and the temptations and the disasters that come. These are not things that he is surprised by. And there's oftentimes two uh, two conclusions, or the two paths that you can walk. One is we harden our hearts like Pharaoh did when the plagues came to Egypt. We harden our hearts to God and get mad at him and embittered toward him, or we bow the knee, right? we bow the knee to him and say, Lord, you are the one that is in control. You are present here. You are my hope. Uh, and as I look at my life, I realize I've not hoped in you. I've not bowed before you, but rather I've hardened my heart in other ways. So here, in a day like we are living in, I think those are our options, right? Either we harden our hearts to God and say, you're not present, or we bow to him and submit ourselves to him. And in that, experience the love, the hope, the faith, the peace that come from a relationship with God and with his people.
That's really wonderfully said. And I want to add to that also, because I feel like the opportunity we have as believers, and even as people who are on the verge of knowledge and are being pulled toward a faith in God, is that in a time period like this, when we're doing self-examination, because we are made in God's image, our character can erupt with joy in a time like this. And where does that come from? That comes
Right.
from our Creator. There's the only way we can laugh and smile, enjoy the beautiful flowers, love on each other, be more kind to our neighbors than we've been before, and things like that, is because we are made in his image. And we have to allow that good character to erupt out of our hearts because we're made to do it. That's what we're made to do. And so I agree with you. It's allowing that channel to come out. And to thaw that bitterness or the hardness that we were fighting, probably because we were wrapped up in control, going back to the beginning of the conversation, thinking
Sure.
that I was the person driving the car. Well, I wasn't, not even a little bit. So I want you to conclude by telling me what you have found, what is on the bright side for you.
Yeah. Well, I think for me and my family, a lot of the things that I've said have become more real for me, and for my family as well. I think this season um, of not having all the opportunities that I had before to work or to connect with people or to teach or to preach or whatever it might be, has really caused me just to kind of take a step back and try to rest, and try to really spend quality time with my family um, that so often can get kind of pushed to the side
Mhm.
in the busyness of life. In the Bible, you have what's called the year of Jubilee, right? Every 7 years, the land is to rest for a whole year. So I've kind of taken that to heart during this season. Man,
Mm.
God has given me an opportunity
Mhm.
uh, to rest well, to spend quality time with my family in a way that I haven't for a long time, and really try to pour into them. That's been so good. That's been so good. And again, another piece that's exciting for me personally, is just seeing God's faithfulness
Yeah.
throughout all of this, right? Faithfulness in relationships, faithfulness in giving, like we had talked about before, and just an excitement and an encouragement from my church and the people that I'm connected with about seeing what God is doing in and through this season and what he will do moving forward. So just being a part of that has been something that's been very encouraging to me during this time.
That's really wonderful. And I just want to tell everyone and encourage everyone also to find a local church to tune into this weekend. Exodus Church is actually located on East Central, just past
Right.
143rd Street.
Yeah,
If you want to
15200.
do the drive through the stages of the cross, that's fantastic. We'll be there. And but definitely tune in, find a YouTube station online. There will be a lot of great truth spoken through this time period. And when you're looking for hope, listening to people who are talking about hope is a great place to start. What you put in helps fill your tank. So thank you so much, Kyle Lammont, Exodus Church. Thank you for
Absolutely.
joining us for On the Bright Side.
Thank you, Janice.